Hello and welcome to Construction Executives Professional Education Series. You have joined Structsy's webinar titled What the Labor Shortage Means for Construction Businesses Like Yours and How to Succeed. My name is Rachel O'Connell and I am Assistant Editor for Construction Executive published by Associated Builders and Contractors. I will be serving as moderator of the presentation. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Bill Wagner, President of Strucsy.
Thank you, Rachel. So good day, everybody. Normally start with good morning or afternoon, but we got people from all over the place on the call. Before we get into the presentation, a little bit about my background. I've been the president at Strucsy and Penta Technologies for 4 years. Marks a return to the construction industry for me. I started way back almost 30 years ago working for my uncle's general contracting business, Swinging a Hammer. In the intervening time period, I bounced around a lot of different industries. I worked in technology, healthcare, manufacturing, distribution. And so hopefully as we go through the presentation today, I'll be able to share some insights from both my time in the construction market, but also some of my time from outside of construction, because I think there's a really interesting thing that's happening in the construction industry right now as we all get crunched for labor, where we're all really interested in looking at opportunities to do more with less and to wring every last bit of efficiency out of our businesses. And that's something that some of the other industries that I've worked in over the course of my 30-year career have done really well. So we're gonna try to steal a few pages out of their playbook. Obviously, with my background, I'm going to come at the labor problem from a technology and productivity perspective, as opposed to say like a human resources or recruiting perspective. We'll touch on a little bit of that stuff, but really my thesis statement here is that leveraging technology is one of the greatest ways for general and specialty contractors to unlock the productivity and the labor you already have, while also attracting new labor to our industry. And so, one of the things I want to start with here is, why does it seem like implementing technology is so difficult in this industry? And I'm not going to read the slide to everybody, but really, the broad overview of this challenge is that construction is a very difficult industry. We've got one of the most complex value chains out of any industry on earth, right? It goes from the owner and the real estate developer to the AEC, to the general contractor, to all the subcontractors, all the way out to the people that will eventually run the large fixed assets that we're all engaged in building. And the complexity of that value chain, the complexity of the work, right? The fact that, really every construction project is a little bit different from the last one you did. And then all of the pressure that we have to deal with related to inputs to construction, right? Supply chain, and you can include your labor force in that supply chain challenge. It makes for a very difficult market to make really, really efficient by leveraging technology. The other thing that we have to deal with here is some of the changing demographics of the people that work with all of us. We'll get into that a little bit deeper in a couple of minutes, but the construction industry is unlike any of the other industries I've worked in my career in the challenges that we face every day. But on the flip side of this, I think that this industry also represents an unprecedented opportunity for all of us to be able to wring more productivity out of the labor that we already have working in construction. So, I talked a little bit about, why is technology so hard for construction? Let's talk a little bit more about what we're dealing with today, right? Because this presentation would be very different if I gave it 2 years ago or 5 years ago, or back in 2009 when we were dealing with the big economic downturn. Today, when I talk to the specialty contractors that I work with on a regular basis, primarily very large specialty contractors, right? Specialty contractors that are doing more than $100 million in revenue, that deal with a lot of inherent complexity inside their business. That's really been the sweet spot for the company I work for the vast majority of our 60-year history. What I'm hearing is that the market, while we all went into 2020, the vast majority of us anyway, with record backlogs, record revenue, there were already signs that we were headed for some rough sledding as an industry, right? The biggest sign was it was very difficult 2 years ago for everybody to get enough employees and enough capacity to get at all of that work that was sitting in all of our backlogs. And then, surprise, surprise, COVID happened, which touched off this massive snowball effect that has made a lot of the things that were already challenges as we were leaving 2019 even more difficult, right? So what I'm hearing when I talk to people now, I'm hearing that in the last year, people have seen short-term productivity hit. I've seen a lot of people that I talk to deal with softening margins in the last year and a half, largely related to all of the extra burden on the business to manage through as an essential workforce while we're all dealing with the complexities of managing through COVID. And then the worst thing that we've all had to deal with is the cost of all the inputs to the work we do has been skyrocketing. And it doesn't look like that's going to start getting back to normal for a little while yet, right? We've seen some encouraging signs with some of the commodity prices for things like lumber and copper start to soften up a little bit, but they're still not quite back to where they were before we entered the pandemic. So that is going to remain a challenge for all of us, on top of the fact that we still can't find enough people to get to all the work. The other couple of things that have been historical issues that we've all had to grapple with, construction remains an industry where there are very low barriers to entry, and construction remains an industry where we continue to see consolidation with the big guys eating the little guys and absorbing them into their business or forcing them out of business. So the net result of all of this is that we work in an industry where it's very difficult to be productive and profitable, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody on the call. That's why when all the construction technology nerds like myself gather in a room, we always end up talking about this chart from the US Department of Labor that shows how the vast majority of the industries in the United States have gotten more productive since the 60s, largely powered by technology and automation, while the construction industry continues to struggle. But the thing that people don't typically talk about when they show this slide is that during those intervening 60, 70 years, the universe continues to stack challenges in front of us, right? The regulatory environment for a construction company is far tougher today than it was back in 1950. The availability of labor to work in your business, primarily skilled labor with some experience, continues to be tougher and tougher to source, right? And so nobody should be surprised when we look at this chart, and yet the construction industry as a whole continues to grow, right? And things continue to get built, and hopefully we're about to enter a period where some of those macroeconomic challenges that we're all facing start to turn around, right? I talked about the input prices starting to level out as all of our suppliers bring their production capacity online. I'm sure all of you are very excited about the federal government finally untying their shoelaces from each other and opening up some of the infrastructure funding that we so badly need in this country. The other thing that's going on is in commercial, where we spend most of our time at Struxy, we're hoping that the owners and developers will look at the fact that the macroeconomic picture has not been as doom and gloom as we all might have expected a year ago when the pandemic hit, and they're going to get back to ramping up construction starts at the pace we were going before we entered into 2020. So I think that there's a bright future ahead for construction. And if you look at this slide, and we all together can figure out a way to start moving that red line up and to the right, it's going to unlock a few different opportunities for us, right? It's going to mean that some of the open jobs that we're struggling so hard to fill right now will be decreased, because hopefully we'll be able to get more done with the same amount of people. More importantly, it means that we all will hopefully enter a period in the construction market where we start to see our operating margins move up and to the right. I think everybody would love to be able to have a little bit more money in the bank to be able to reinvest in their business, so that you can attract that new talent and so that you could continue propelling your productivity up and to the right. Let's talk specifically about labor on a construction project, right? Some of the stuff that we're going to be facing as significant headwinds in this market in the next 10 years, 20% of the workforce is likely to age out. And unfortunately for most of us, that 20% seems to be located in the cohort of all of the people that make the decisions inside of our companies and have all of the experience. That is a significant challenge that we're going to have to face up to. Being able to transfer the knowledge that a skilled electrician has accumulated over 50 years of working in the trades, or a skilled mason, or a project manager, or someone that works in your project controls department, that is going to be difficult, even if there were a stockpile of people waiting on the sidelines to replace all those folks coming right out of their union programs or their trade schools. That organizational transfer of knowledge is going to be a significant challenge for most of us over the next 10 years. Meanwhile, the demand continues to keep going up and to the right. If the infrastructure funding gets unlocked, if the owner community continues to invest in construction projects at the pace we were moving before we went into the pandemic, that's only going to make that problem worse. And some of the numbers I've seen have been astronomical in terms of how many open jobs there are right now in construction and how many open jobs there are going to be 3 years from now. We're talking, jobs that need to get filled on the order of 7-figure numbers, right? We're talking millions of people need to join our industry in the next 10 years if this labor crunch is at least going to stay where it's at right now and not get worse. Then the other thing, whenever I get out and talk to specialty contractors, whenever I look at the statistics, I typically see a percentage higher than the one in the last bullet point on this slide in terms of how many people are facing difficulty finding skilled labor to get to the work. One of the things that I typically ask construction executives when I get the opportunity to talk to them is, tell me your 3 biggest challenges, or tell me your 3 biggest areas of focus for your business over the next couple of years. In the 4 years that I've been doing this, since I came back to the construction industry, working for a technology company, I have not had one construction executive tell me anything other than labor or labor productivity is their #1 challenge or their #1 focus area over the next 3 years. So it's a really big issue, which brings us to our first poll question. So Rachel, if you could ask the poll question, let's actually see with this audience today. I'm guessing that everybody's going to square up, and we're going to end up with people over 56% saying that this is a big issue.
I don't want to bet against you there. I'll read it out. It says, what best describes your organization's expectation on the labor market over the next 6 months? The options are, it will continue to be easy to hire, it will become easier to hire, it will continue to be harder to hire, it will become harder to hire, and no change. Okay, it looks like Bill was right. 0% of the audience said it would continue to be easy to hire. 4% of you all said it would become easier to hire. And 61% of the audience has said it will continue to be harder to hire. 33% have predicted it would become harder to hire, and 2% have predicted no change.
All right, so more than 90% of you think this is either going to continue to be a real difficulty or it's arguably going to get worse. So let's spend a little bit more time framing out the problem, and then I want to get into what I've seen in other industries and what I've started to see in construction, which I think might be behind the 4% of you that said that this might become easier in the future. My goal in life with what I do in my day job is to get to the point where more of you are pressing that button that says it will become easier to hire. And as I said at the beginning of this, I'm coming at this from a technology and labor productivity perspective. So let's talk about why it is so hard to get these people excited to work in our industry, right? What I have seen in the 4% where it's becoming easier, I am seeing companies invest in modernizing the way they do business. I am seeing specialty contractors who are investing heavily in training their workforce in technology. They're bringing drones on job sites. They're rolling out wearable devices. They've got people that are dedicated to a growing robotic part of their operations, right? And robotics isn't just robots on job sites. It's also computerized robots doing things on computers in the back office that make the back office much more efficient. I've seen specialty contractors be really successful getting really smart project managers and construction engineers out of college and empowering them with technology to drive change inside their business. Those younger construction professionals, if you sit down and talk to them, the really good ones, they don't want to deal with paper. They don't want to deal with labyrinthine manual processes. They want more operational freedom on the job site, which is a very scary thing to give them when they're new and they're green, which is why technology can sometimes help with that challenge. They don't like spending all day in Microsoft Excel typically, right? And they're mobile. And when I say mobile, they're mobile from a technology perspective, right? This is the generation that's coming into our workforce right now grew up with smartphones, right? I'm old enough where I made it all the way through my bachelor's degree without having to worry about cell phone cameras, which was a good thing for me. But the group that's coming out of college today, they've had cell phones since they were in elementary school. And so they're used to using their cell phone as the tether to all of the world's information. And they're really good at using that tool set to be unbelievably productive if you set the table for them to be able to bring that into your business. The other thing that I've seen is being able to streamline the way your business works and get all the non-value added cruft out of your business processes is a great way to get these people excited and charged up. And it also allows you to get them to ramp into being productive a heck of a lot faster, right? One of the things that we've done at my company in the last 2 years, we've gone to be a fully virtual business that doesn't have an office anymore. We've embraced a bring your own device policy for all of our computers and cell phones. And we've moved all of our computer platforms into the cloud, which means that we have a really easy time attracting young, bright, tech-savvy people into our business. Construction feels like it's still behind the curve with all of that stuff. I was just at an IT conference for construction IT professionals a month ago, and there was a panel discussion about securing your networks as a business. And over 90% of the room said they would never even look at a bring your own device policy inside their business because they were worried about the security implications, which is a legit concern. Like, I get it. Bring your own device opens up a potential opportunity for people to get into your networks and do bad things. But I can tell you that if you go outside of the construction industry, if I was in a room with software company IT professionals and that exact same question got asked, better than 50% of that room not only would have said, we're looking at bring your own device policies for our business, more than 50% of the room probably has already executed that as a way to make the company more resilient, more attractive to younger workers. And the productivity gains on the backside of a simple decision like that are significant, right? My company pays everybody a stipend now to buy your own hardware. We give you guidance. We have guidelines for the types of protection you need to maintain on your computer. We force everybody to maintain good computer safety practices. But what that did to my capital budget for IT hardware is it flattened it out, and I could deploy that money now in terms of more efficient recruiting to bring more people into my business. So there's opportunities for us to be able to really attract these young workers, and we're going to have to, because, you know, like it or not, those construction professionals that are coming out of trade school, coming out of college, you want to hire them, your competitor wants to hire them. Well, guess what? I'd like to hire those people too. And I can tell you that as it stands today, if I get into a competition with a traditional specialty contractor and I start talking about all the really cool progressive things that my business is doing with technology, that's a huge poker chip that gets banked on my side of the table and not yours. So I think understanding that the people that we want to bring into this industry think very differently than people that are my age or your age is really important as you think about leveraging technology inside your business. I also talked about mobility. You know, I still talk to contractors who claim that their labor force doesn't have smartphones and doesn't have email addresses. Newsflash, the vast majority of people in this country today have smartphones and have email addresses. The two things are interlinked. You can't have a smartphone without an email address. And this chart will show you that, you know, mobile technology, right? You've got over 90% of people have a cell phone that is connected to the internet 24/7. And we were up over 80% of people in this country owning a smartphone as we got into 2020 last year. And so if you think about that, right, like every single one of the laborers on every job site you have has a little black square in their pocket that has more computing power than a supercomputer had 15 years ago. And I would be willing to bet that the vast majority of you are doing absolutely nothing to leverage that opportunity to run a more efficient business. It's just sitting right there for you. So I think, you know, one of the things that I think we need to think about is this idea that the people that are doing the work are not tech savvy and don't want technology, which we'll get back to in a couple of minutes. The other thing I could tell you is that Wall Street and the investment community is betting significant amounts of money that our industry is going to figure out how to leverage technology to unlock that productivity and grow. So this slide, something I put together shortly after I returned to the construction industry. And I can tell you the numbers on this slide absolutely blew my mind 3.5 years ago. Most of you that own construction companies, if you've ever bought or sold a construction company, you know that the asking price for your company typically is some multiple of your profits. That hasn't been the case for construction technology companies for quite some time. The asking price for a construction technology company is typically some massive multiple of your top line revenue, whether or not you're profitable. So when you see companies like Autodesk buying PlanGrid for almost $900 million when they hadn't even cracked $100 million in revenue yet, when you see Trimble buy eBuilder for 500 million or Viewpoint Software for 1.2 billion. That is Wall Street and the people with money and the people that have the longer range vision betting that these construction technology firms are going to provide the toolkit that is going to get adopted by contractors and is going to unlock massive amounts of productivity, because Wall Street doesn't spend the money if they can't see a pathway to getting it back and getting more back than they put in. And so this hasn't shown any signs of cooling off right now. In fact, it's getting even hotter. When I talk to investment bankers and private equity firms that play in our space in the last 6 months, what they have all told me is they're dealing with the exact same stuff you're all dealing with. They don't have enough people to get to the deals. There's so much money flowing into this industry right now, betting that we're going to be able to use technology to become more productive. And I think it's a smart bet. I think it's one that's going to pay off. Why is that? Because even now, construction remains one of the least digitized markets in the entire world. The only market that the experts can find that is arguably less technologically sophisticated than construction right now is the agricultural and hunting industry, which I didn't even know hunting was an industry until I saw this chart from McKinsey a couple of years ago. And that's already after we've all made massive investments in digitizing our pre-construction, in digitizing our back office. And so there's a lot more juice that we can squeeze out of this digitization thing in our industry if we're really focused on it. But let's talk about the state we're in right now with this, right? In 2018, 70% of all construction firms dedicated less than 1% of their top line revenue to technology. That number hasn't changed much in the intervening 4 years, right? According to McKinsey, investors have poured more than $30 billion into this space since 2008. Some of the other stats that McKinsey threw out there a couple of years ago when they dug really deeply into this, numbers like 60% of all construction projects go over budget or over time, right? We can do so much better with this as an industry. My company is a software company. Around 50% of our top line revenue gets poured back into R&D and technology inside our business. It's a pretty significant gap between where the technology industry is and where the construction industry is. And I would argue that closing that gap by just a couple of percentage points, if you guys can find your way to dedicate a little bit more money to become technologically enabled, not only will you get the productivity gain, but if you start talking more like you're a digitized firm, you might be able to get a better valuation for your company, right? The Katerra story is fascinating, right? Katerra came in and said, hey, we're going to completely reinvent the way construction is done. They got $1 billion of investment from SoftBank in Japan. They ultimately failed. They were burning through money at an unbelievably staggering rate. But the reason why they were able to get that type of valuation and that type of investment is because they didn't talk like a traditional construction company. They talked like a technologically enabled construction company, which made them worth more money to investors. And so increasing your percentage of spend on R&D and technology will pay you back almost immediately in terms of increasing your productivity, but it also has the ability to pay you back in the long term by making your company worth more, because people value technological enablement in business. Why hasn't this happened yet? The reason it hasn't happened is a lot of us point out the struggles of getting the technology implemented on the job site. I'm very familiar with the challenges of what happens on a job site because I used to work on one. I also work in an industry in software where the way we tackle the work is very similar to the way a construction company builds a building. You start a software project, and most of the time when you're building something in software, it's something you've never built before. You may have built something similar, but you've never built exactly this before. And you come up with your great plan and you say, all right, we think we know roughly what this is going to cost. how long it's going to take, how many people we need to work on it. And then almost immediately, once you start working, you start getting hit with surprises, right? That's what happens in a construction job site every day. We're managing exceptions all the time. That is a very difficult environment to deploy business process change inside of, which makes it a very difficult environment to deploy technology inside of. That said, I have seen people be very successful, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about in a couple of minutes. I'm going to give everybody a lightweight playbook for how you could get started with this stuff. The other stuff I see in this industry that I haven't really seen as much in other industries where I've worked, there can be a lot of dysfunction between your technology staff and your operations staff. Your operations staff in most construction companies is typically a lot larger than your technology staff. They have a lot more political clout inside the business. And a lot of times I've seen those two groups turn into almost warring factions, which precludes the IT people from learning operations inside the business, which I think is a critical linchpin in order to make deploying new technology and technological disruptions into your business process successful. There's a lack of perceived value and leadership buy-in, which is why I harp so much on how being technologically enabled makes your company worth more. And then the budget and time constraint thing is something that we all struggle with. I have a kind of a running joke where I say, I talk to a lot of people who tell me, Bill, I'm too busy losing money to take time out to figure out how I could save money or make more money tomorrow. And that is a very real challenge we have, and it's exacerbated by the fact that we're dealing with this labor crunch. But I think at some point we got to decide as an industry that is enough is enough. We're going to start funneling more money into this challenge, and we're going to take more time to get everybody lined up and on the same team so we could tackle it purposefully. You know, one of the examples that I give is I'm old enough to have been working on a construction job site when cordless tools were invented. I didn't have to go through and create an act of Congress, you know, like a bill becoming a law, to get approval from my boss to go buy a bunch of cordless drill drivers back when they came out. You know, it was really simple. Hey, dude, if we spend a couple grand on some cordless drills, we're not going to be lugging extension cords around the job site anymore. It's going to free everybody up. We're going to be a lot more productive almost immediately. You're going to get the payback calculation. I encountered almost no pushback. That is a form of technological disruption, and that is a way to technologically enable a work crew to become more efficient. And today, like, you would be crazy to take the cordless tools away. It's the exact same thing for some of these advanced pieces of software, and we've started to see them kind of push into the business from the pre-construction side. And I think what's about to happen next is we're going to see a lot more software and a lot more digital tools that we can actually deploy right on the job site. And the reason that's happening is I'm seeing a lot more strategic software partnerships in the industry, right? One of the challenges we've had is, you know, you buy a new tool, you got to convince a bunch of guys in the field to change the way they're performing the work in order to use the tool. And then you got to figure out how to make sure that that tool is connected to all of your other business processes inside your company. That's traditionally been very difficult and very expensive. It's not difficult and expensive anymore. And we've seen this in other industries, right? 8-9 years before I was working for Penta, I had my own consulting firm. It was really easy for me to get a digital customer relationship management tool to keep track of my sales funnel. It was really easy for me to get up on QuickBooks so I could manage my accounting. It was really easy for me to get that CRM to talk to QuickBooks all by myself without an IT person, right? That is starting to happen inside construction, right? Companies like Autodesk have their platform where, you know, they're starting to go from pre-construction to building the job to closeout, all within inside their ecosystem. And they've made it really easy for third-party software providers to plug into that system. Trimble's doing the same thing, right? So one of the reasons why they bought the Viewpoint ERP a few years ago was to give them a platform that they could plug other pieces of software into. You know, we live in a world where Procore is worth over $10 billion right now, and they have always, from the beginning, embrace this idea of being an open system with a third-party software marketplace with things that plug into Procore without having to get a whole bunch of IT people involved. And so being able to seamlessly integrate all these solutions gives you a lot more inherent flexibility in how you can deploy them to help you with your operational process. That brings us to the second polling question. So Rachel, I'm going to throw it back to you. Let's talk about what's in the way of technology inside your companies for a couple of minutes.
So this second poll is, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing construction companies that can be alleviated with technology? Collaboration, payroll and accounting, increasing productivity, job site safety and training, or labor shortage? We've closed the poll, and the results are 59% of those who responded collaboration as something facing construction companies that can be alleviated with technology. 8% selected payroll and accounting, 2% selected security, 10% selected job site safety, and 20% have selected labor shortage.
Thank you, everybody, for answering. The collaboration thing is fascinating, right? Like the amount of information that needs to be transmitted in real time on a typical construction project can sometimes feel staggering, right? That's where that interoperability between all these different platforms that I talked about a couple of minutes ago becomes really important, right? You don't have to do it all though, right? You could take a small slice of the problem. That's one of the reasons why PlanGrid was purchased for almost $900 million a couple of years ago, right? They took a very small slice of the problem. How do we get all of the people that need to collaborate around the set of drawings together in the drawing? And how do we cut down on the amount of triangulation that happens and the amount of out of sync changes that we have to deal with on our job site on a daily basis, right? Our solution helps people better manage their labor costs and their actual versus estimated units of production on a daily basis on a job. And once that foreman is in that piece of software for 5 minutes a day, just checking off, right? This team of people spent 4 hours doing site prep and spent another 4 hours doing prep in the laydown yard. And this group of folks spent 4 hours doing form work and another 4 hours doing rebar. And we got X amount done today. Once that information is digitized and it's no longer inside their head, that information is now automatically available to anybody that might want to look at it or use it to run a more effective job. And so I think this collaboration piece is a really interesting one. It also ties back to my thesis earlier that we're going to have to get more technologically enabled if we want to attract younger people to this market. You know, what's the criticism that old guys like me have for younger people? It's that they spend all their time with their nose in their phone on social media all day. That's because they grew up in a more collaborative environment and they're used to being able to use the wisdom of the group, right? The knowledge of the crowd to be able to get things done. And I think if we could figure out how to technologically facilitate that on our job sites, there's a lot of real opportunity for construction companies. So, you know, it's clear that construction companies need to do more with less time, less money, more importantly, fewer boots on the ground. Hopefully I've made the case to at least get some of you interested in exploring digital tools as a mechanism to be able to do more with less. I promised a few minutes ago, though, that I was going to leave everybody with a little mini playbook for how you can get started. And so I think the starting point here is the why, right? Why should your company implement more technology? You shouldn't do it just for technology's sake. You should do it because technology wielded the right way will have a positive impact on your bottom line, both through enhanced margins and through increasing the valuation of your firm. Lightweight tech should help you realize cost savings almost immediately. You shouldn't have to spend $5 million implementing a new ERP system in order to make your guys and ladies more efficient, right? You could go get a couple of PlanGrid licenses and digitize your drawings. You could go get a digital time clock or an app that allows your project managers to better keep track of production versus the estimate. You could digitize more of your pre-construction and figure out, once we've got the pre-construction digitized, how do we flow that through to the actual project execution? I've seen a lot of construction companies successfully leverage closeout tools to make sure that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted as they get done with the project, right? Hand it back to the owner and the facility managers. And so I think this idea of there's a real business case for it. There's a case where it's going to help your labor productivity. And then the fact that now you have this opportunity to not have to swallow the entire business process end to end and digitize it, you could take a small slice with a point solution and be relatively comfortable that if you make a smart decision, that point solution is going to talk to all of the other stuff that you eventually bring into your business. I think that is the right way to start looking at, how do I get started, right? It's just like my cordless drill analogy. I didn't go with a pair of wire cutters and cut every extension cord on the job site in half. We started with cordless drill drivers. We eventually got to the point where the technology got mature enough where we could get rid of the cords on our miter saws, right? On our mixers for mortar and cement, right? It's one of these things where I think that the thinner the slice you could take to get started, the better off you're going to be and the easier you're going to make it on yourself. The other thing I would love everybody to focus on is focus on productivity. It's the best way to avoid doing technology for technology's sake or doing technology because you think it's cool. Look for solutions that eliminate repetitive administrative work. We all have too much of it inside our businesses. If you've got a bunch of people in your payroll department hand entering paper timesheets into an accounting system just to get your team paid, you can digitize that. And then guess what? You now have a bunch of smart people that know your business working inside your back office that you can have go do other more high value added work. You could maybe deploy some of those people in your purchasing department to analyze your vendors. You could deploy a couple of those people in your human resources department to help you with recruiting. You could move them into job cost control, right? There's lots of places to pick up efficiency if you just know where to look. And it's usually process-based, where you're asking people to do manual things all day long where they're not really adding value by leveraging their experience. You got to make sure you bring the right technology on board. And as a technology vendor to this industry, I love it when prospects make me run the ropes course. Hey, Bill, what is this going to cost? What is it going to take to implement? Have you been successful in doing it before? And how soon am I going to know that this was the right decision? And even better, how soon am I going to know when I'm going to get all that money back? Those are questions you should ask every single technology vendor that is trying to sell you something. And you should be satisfied by their answers to every one of those questions, right? And then, this idea of creating a single source of truth for your job site data, while all of these software applications are becoming more interconnected or easier to interconnect, I think one of the things that businesses need to really think through is, what is the system of record where all of the information is going to eventually sit, right? I've talked to some construction companies that have decided that their project management software is going to be their system of record, and the accounting system is just going to be a general ledger system. I've talked to others who have said the accounting system is a system of record. It houses all the information. And I've talked to others that have said, you know what, Bill, I've got more of a distributed system of record, but I've been very intentional about deciding what goes where. So my HRIS system is where all my employees sit. My accounting system is where payroll and job costs are located. And my project management system is where all my project docs sit. And I've thought really deeply about how all of those systems talk to each other. And I'm talking about this through more of a business process lens. And then I leave it to the IT nerds to figure out how we connect all that stuff together, which again has gotten way easier for a smaller mid-sized construction company to be able to get done in 2021 than it was even 2 years ago. Once you've got those answers to those questions, right? I found some places where there's repetitive administrative work. I've forced my technology vendors to run the ropes course. I've thought about how this thing's going to plug into the systems of record that I use to make decisions to run the business. Ask these questions. What is the potential productivity payoff? What is the impact on my operating margins if I do this? What does the implementation and the day-to-day use of this look like, right? One of the things that we pride ourselves on is people that use our software don't spend a lot of time in our software because you don't pay them to be software operators. You pay them to get stuff done on job sites. And so the less time they could spend in our software while still populating all of the data and reviewing the data to make better decisions, the better off we all are in the end. And then, will this significantly impact my bottom line? And then you got to set the time frame where you true up against that, right? We're all familiar with short interval scheduling for getting stuff built. We should use the same thing when we implement and roll out technology inside our business, right? We should take the thin slice of the problem. We should answer all these questions, but then we should say, you know what? I'm not going to wait 6 months to make sure that the answer to all these questions is yes. It is working. Yes, it is having an impact on my bottom line. Yes, it is allowing me to redeploy more of those very valuable human resources that are loose inside my business. And if the answers are no, when you've taken that very short time frame to ask those questions, you can decide for yourself, right? Are we confident that we could flip those answers to yes and get the payback really quickly? Or is the answer no? If the answer is no, you need to put that stuff in the past and move on to the next one, because that's what really smart businesses do with technology. They iterate really rapidly. That's how you find the right mix of solutions for your business, especially in a market like construction where we all have such unique business processes. A couple other things that I think everybody should focus on when you do start implementing a new technology. You got to choose the right data directly on a job site. You got to make sure that you get that data as real time as possible for people. You should get everybody on the same page before you implement. All of the successful contractors that I work with that have been good at implementing technology, there is no battle between IT and operations. They're one and the same. They all have the same goal, which is to make the business more efficient and more profitable. The IT guys understand what life is like for the operations folks. They get out on job sites. They can speak to the process that the company runs from initial bid and estimating through project management, through to actual execution, through to closeout, right? That helps everybody. The really successful ones actually appoint dual champions from IT and ops to lead the rollout of the new technology. And the really lucky ones are able to cherry pick the operations people from the field, not the operational back office of their business, which goes a long way to getting everybody bought into using the new technology, because sometimes this stuff is scary to get started with. And I mentioned before the execute and iterate. Shorter time frames are better. More black and white answers to is this working? Am I getting the payback is really important. And if you stick to this playbook with these 3 points, you're really going to go a long way towards stacking the deck to help make yourself more successful. If you decide that, you know what, Bill, you made a great point. I could be doing more with technology to help me make my existing labor more productive. And once I do that, it's going to help me attract this new generation of construction professionals because they want to work in a company that's efficient and technologically enabled. So with that, I am done with my presentation, and it looks like I left us a few minutes for some questions. You can enter your questions in the chat. I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel for a little bit of housekeeping, and she's going to help me facilitate the conversation for the next 10 or 15 minutes.
Thank you, Bill. we right off the bat do have a couple of questions if you're ready to take them.
Yeah, lay them on me. The harder, the better.
That's the attitude I like to see. Uh, this person has asked, how can I get my employees to buy in on using technology?
You know, everybody's afraid of this, and I get asked this question all the time. But in practice, I don't see it as this huge foundational issue for the industry, right? I think the best technological implementations are championed and rolled out by the employees themselves. You need the top-down buy-in, right? Because you're talking about spending money, you're talking about potentially screwing around with pre-existing business process that I hope has been successful for your company for a very long time. But if you can get a couple of these younger, more tech-savvy folks to start using the technology, it goes a really long way with establishing the credibility with their peers inside the business, right? The top-down mandate thing doesn't work. I've rarely seen it work. You know, one of the products that we sell is a big, really complex construction ERP system that you could run your entire business on. The implementations for that software that fail are driven by a couple of executives who are completely disconnected from the day-to-day operations of their business. The implementations that go really well, that come in on time and under budget, and have everybody using the system to its greatest effect, are the ones where we do a really good job pulling in all the people who are doing the work, and we give them the autonomy and the authority to drive the implementation of that technology.
Here's a question two. How do we efficiently use technology on the job site without a distraction?
Yeah, I mean, that's a prioritization thing. And what I would say is if it even gets into the gray zone of potentially being a distraction, you need to stop and you need to pull everybody together and you need to have a conversation about what's going on with this piece of technology. Because that's a leading indicator that you just rolled out a piece of technology that's probably not going to work for you. The best technologies that you deploy get that buy-in from the boots on the ground really quickly and are relatively easy to implement without completely upsetting all of the apple carts on your job site. Because, you know, we all deal with enough firefighting and exception management in our day jobs as it is. We don't need to deploy a bunch of technology that does that as well. So I would say it's not about using technology without it becoming a distraction. It's more about listening very closely for when it becomes a distraction and dropping the 50-ton anvil right on top of it, like almost immediately, and figuring out, do we cut bait or is there a path forward where we could deploy this stuff without it being a distraction to the folks that need to run the business?
Do you have any tips for new talent as opposed to traditional approaches like recruiting from high schools and apprenticeships? Maybe a few fresh ideas?
Yeah, I do. And I also have, I mean, everybody probably realizes by now, 55 minutes in, that I'm not shy. I'm not really shy about expressing my opinion. I think, you know, the next generation of workers that we need, they want to work for progressive, socially inclusive organizations that leverage technology to empower the team, right? And so I think that there's two things with this finding new talent, right? There's what are the channels that you're using to get your message out, right? And you know, kind of tied in with that, like where are you looking for the talent? But then probably more important is like, what's your message that you're broadcasting? Because people don't want to work in their dad's construction company, right? They want to be someplace that values them almost immediately on day one. The long ramp time to feel like you're contributing in a skilled trade is a bit of an issue. And so I think that the more you can broadcast a progressive message that, hey, we are not the construction company of 20 years ago. This is a progressive industry. We're using computers every day. We've got really cool technology on the job site. You're a knowledge worker if you're working on one of our job sites. I think that is a really important tip for finding that new bank of talent. And then I think, inside the question that was submitted, hey, we've tried a lot of the traditional approaches, right? Recruiting from high schools, trying to spin up apprenticeships. We could use some fresh ideas. What are you doing with social media, right? Because that's where most of the eyeballs are with that cohort of people. Do you have a good LinkedIn presence? What are you doing on Facebook? Are you doing anything with video on YouTube, right? I've seen some unbelievably creative recruiting videos from construction companies that are very playful with the way they've elevated their culture inside their business to be something that is a lot more attractive to that younger audience. And I think those are all things that you should be thinking about when you're trying to source that next round of talent.
Okay, that looks like all of the questions that we have for today. Oh, actually, one just popped up. That's exciting. A twist. How do you work with employees who are not proficient in of yet to use digital technology in the field? For instance, my company has a problem getting site personnel to take pictures of their work and upload them to the cloud-based platform.
Yes, vast majority of the people that are working on all of our job sites speak either non-native English or a foreign language nowadays. There could be two root issues here. One is the technology might not be as easy to use as it could be, right? So, people who speak any language on planet Earth can get into Gmail and use it. They can use Google, right? Because the technology was designed to be able to facilitate it regardless of whatever language you speak. So that might be a problem, right? And I think you can investigate that. You could talk to some of the people that are struggling and you could have the honest conversation. Is the technology not easy to use if you're not a native English speaker? But I suspect that the root issue is the other root issue that I sometimes see when people have this problem. It's that whoever implemented it and did the training did it from a native English speaker centric view of the world, right? And so, a lot of the really good software that's out there today, like the aforementioned tools that you could get from Google, doesn't really matter what language you speak, but if you implement them the wrong way and you provide the wrong instructions and it's not really clear for those non-native English speakers, you're going to end up having that implementation problem and you're going to have a hard problem maintaining compliance. And so what you could do, if you're going to have to go talk to those folks anyway who are not complying with the new business process and they're non-native English speakers, you could ask them, hey, like, give it to me straight. Is this software just tough to use if you say speak Spanish? But if they say no, like, I think it's something else, see if you can maybe draft a couple of those people to help you re-implement the software with those non-native English speakers, because that can sometimes go a real long way to helping people wrap their brain around what they're now being asked to do. And then hopefully you could draft a couple of those folks into helping you maintain compliance with the software as well.
Thank you, Bill. I think that was the last one that time. So we are going to close out the webinar. We'd like to thank Struxy for sponsoring the webinar and Bill for his excellent tips mitigating the labor shortage, all of his expertise today. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. We hope you found this webinar valuable.